in darkness when suddenly a familiar woman's voice laughed softly near my ear. "Stop writing that letter already. Hurry home. Your man's back on leave. He brought a bunch of stuff with him." I rubbed my eyes and looked up to see Lisa, my neighbor, standing there. "You scared me," I said, startled. "What do you mean, me? What's wrong with you? Are you in shock or something?" Lisa frowned, seeing me staring at her and stammering without being able to form a full sentence. Lisa, whose legs were perfectly fine, reached out and gave me a little shove. "What are you standing around like that for? Get moving. If you're late, that shameless Zoe Miller will snatch everything your man brought back with him. And forget that letter. Just talk to him face to face." I looked down at the registered letter clutched in my hand, then back at Lisa's perfectly healthy legs. Without even thinking, I lifted my hand and bit down on my finger. It hurt. It really hurt. So what was going on? Had I really come back? I couldn't believe something so incredible had happened. "Lisa, what year is it right now?" I asked. She gave me a weird look. "It's 1980 during grain rain." "What kind of question is that? Are you okay?" 1980. Grain rain. I really came back. I had returned to grain rain of 1980, this very day. On this exact day in my previous life, Tina Martin had just begun to stand and slowly walk. I'd been so thrilled, I rushed to send a letter to Jack Carter to share the good news. But right after the letter was sent, Jack came back from the army. He brought with him a massive piece of news. The military had approved bringing spouses to live on base. But the person he chose to take with him wasn't me. It was Zoe Miller. Just thinking about it made my blood boil. I didn't care about anything else. I turned and ran straight home. I got there quickly. The moment I pushed open the gate, I could see the entire yard clearly. Tina, who had suffered from polio, was using a chair to practice walking, clumsily and with great effort. In my past life, I had made her do this every single day. To help Tina stand up again, I didn't just leave it to her. I trained with her, stayed by her side. Even when I was exhausted like a dog, I still made time, 2 full hours every day, to give her massage therapy and physical support. Tina only stood up again because I refused to give up, working day and night without pause. They say the love from raising someone is greater than that of giving birth. I know I never treated her poorly. Any good food I had, I saved for her. I poured all my love and energy into her. And how did she repay me? Not even 2 years after Jack and his mother Zoe took her in, she erased everything I had done for her. The way I died so quickly in that life. Tina played a part in that. I stared at Tina standing in the yard and gave a silent, cold smile. Ungrateful little traitor. "Hello again, Tina. In this life, don't even dream of becoming a normal person. You'll stay crippled. Get used to it." I shifted my gaze away from her and continued scanning the courtyard for the rest of them, my real enemies. But I didn't see my in-laws. Jack and Zoe weren't there either, so where were they? I didn't go inside the house. Instead, I circled around the building to the back and pressed close to the window. I could hear low voices coming from inside in the middle of a quiet conversation. "Mom, I got promoted," Jack's voice said. "The army approved bringing family with me." Margaret, his mother, sounded thrilled. "That's wonderful. Zoe should take my grandson and go with you." "But I can't do that," Jack said hesitantly. "The spot is supposed to be for Michelle. If I give it to someone else, she'll be upset." Zoe's soft, delicate voice chimed in, just like always. "It's okay. I don't mind." Then Jack's father snorted coldly. "So what if she's upset? This house doesn't revolve around her." "Exactly," Margaret said. "Even if she's unhappy, she'll just have to swallow it. And if she dares to make a fuss, your dad and I will deal with her. We'll teach her a lesson." Jack sounded conflicted. "Isn't that too harsh? No matter what, she's still my wife, and it's not like she did anything wrong." "You don't know the full story," Zoe said in a soft, pitiful tone. "Michelle's really not a good person. She's lazy and selfish." Using Tina's illness as an excuse, I was constantly running around. Your father and I worked ourselves like spinning tops, and he didn't show an ounce of concern. Luckily, your sister-in-law was here to help. Otherwise, we couldn't have managed a single day. Even though I already knew that Margaret and her husband were rotten to the core, I didn't expect them to lie so shamelessly with open eyes. I was shaking with rage. Inside, Jack was clearly upset too. He stood up abruptly in pain. I'm going to find Michelle, he said. I want to ask her why she's acting this way. Forget it, don't go, Jack's father, George, interrupted. What's the point of asking? She's a woman dragging around a disabled child. Her life's already hard enough. Your mother, Zoe, and we just feel sorry for her. Zoe's voice chimed in, gentle as ever. Besides, Zoe's a good one. Even after your older brother passed, she never remarried, and she gave birth to the eldest grandson of our family, our only heir. You have to take good care of her for your brother's sake. Margaret agreed wholeheartedly. That's right, Zoe's kind, gentle, and respectful. She doesn't just care for your father and me, she takes good care of Tina too. You won't find a girl like her, even with a lantern in broad daylight. You promised your brother you'd look after his wife and son. So this time, when you go live on base, you must take Zoe and our grandson with you. These two old snakes. No matter how much I poured my heart and soul into this family, they treated my efforts like trash, completely worthless. I was furious, but I forced myself to stay calm and kept listening. A few minutes later, the decision about who would go with Jack to the military base had been finalized. Jack and George left the house, leaving only Zoe and Margaret inside. I was about to leave too, but then I heard Margaret lower her voice and say, Zoe, your father and I have fought hard to get you this opportunity. Don't waste it. I'm counting on you to give us another grandchild. If you get pregnant this time, maybe twins, and then a second baby, we'll have heirs to carry on the Carter family line. The whole family depends on you. So that was it. From the very beginning, Jack's parents had been pushing for this. They'd been planning it all along. Well, that was perfect. I'd been worrying on the way back that maybe they didn't know, that maybe I'd hurt innocent people by fighting back. But since they were all in on it, I could deal with them freely, without guilt. After I walked away from the window, I stayed outside for a moment to calm myself, then returned to the front yard. Jack and George were standing there, and when they saw me, Jack turned with irritation in his eyes. Where were you? Why are you only getting back now? I stared straight at him and answered slowly, word by word. Where could I go? Just out there, breaking my back and wearing myself out doing all the farm work. Your parents are too old now, backs and knees aching, they can't do a thing. Your sister-in-law, the oh-so-precious one, is always sick and can't work in the fields either. So who's left? Just me. The poor, miserable one stuck doing everything. Jack's face twisted with anger. He'd clearly been poisoned by Margaret's lies, convinced that I was unfaithful, lazy, and deceitful. Michelle, what kind of twisted nonsense are you saying? You think I don't know what kind of person you really are? Oh, really? And what kind of person is that? I snapped back, fuming. Tell me, who else besides me has been doing all the work in this house? Name one other person who's helped me. You're being unreasonable, Jack shouted. Just because I've given you face doesn't mean I don't know what you've been doing behind my back. I'm warning you, stay in line. Well, thank you so much for the warning, I said coldly. But what exactly have I done that's so shameful, huh? Why don't you say it loud and clear? Or should I call a village meeting? Invite the village head, the secretary, and everyone in town, and let's discuss all my supposed wrongdoings publicly? I wasn't holding back. I pressed him hard, without a trace of tenderness or affection. I didn't play the soft-spoken, devoted wife. I gave him nothing but the raw truth. Jack grew even more furious and started yelling about calling someone to settle things properly. But I knew if anyone really came to mediate, their lies would be exposed. George quickly grabbed his arm to stop him. Margaret and Zoe rushed out of the house to pull Jack back too. Zoe, of course, didn't forget to play the gentle peacemaker. Michelle, Jack only gets to come home once every few years. Can't you be a little more understanding? Margaret chimed in, her voice sharp and scolding. That's right, my son's out there defending the country. Even if he hasn't earned medals, he's still worked hard for this family. Michelle, how dare you yell at me? Have you no sense of law and order? Margaret snapped. What does your son's hard work have to do with me? I shot back. Did he ever give me a single cent? Ever lend me a hand? Jack was trembling with rage. Michelle, are you even reasonable anymore? Every month, I only kept a tiny bit of my salary for myself. I sent the rest home, to you. I still have all the remittance slips. You can't just deny that with a few words. I really haven't seen a penny of it, I said coldly, and I had no idea you were supposedly kind enough to send money back to me. I turned my gaze on everyone around me. Did any of you ever see the money Jack sent home? Margaret? George? Zoe? Not a single one of them dared to meet my eyes. They all avoided my gaze like cowards. I sneered. Could it be the post office stole it? Should we go together and ask the postal workers for an explanation? Seeing me suddenly act out of character and create a scene, Margaret realized she couldn't keep the lie going any longer. She started cursing me, calling me ungrateful and heartless, and then jumped forward as if to hit me. Zoe immediately played the role of the peacemaker, trying to stop her, only to conveniently trip and collapse onto the ground, pretending to faint. Margaret immediately sprang into action. Jack, your sister-in-law fainted. Hurry and take her to the hospital. Don't let anything happen to her. So Jack and his parents rushed Zoe, who was clearly faking her condition, to the town hospital. I didn't bother going along for the show. Instead, I went out to the backyard, grabbed a large rooster, and with one clean stroke, slit its throat. Blood splattered everywhere, and my hands were soaked in it, but I felt more exhilarated than I had in years. Today was just the beginning. The real show was still ahead. The entire Carter family had schemed against me, each one of them cold-blooded and heartless, and I would return every ounce of that cruelty with interest. All they had to do was wait. It didn't take long for Zoe to, miraculously, regain consciousness at the hospital. She turned on the waterworks, crying like a helpless victim, claiming that in order to avoid coming between Jack and me, she had decided not to go with him to the army base. She said she would stay behind to take care of the child and Jack's parents. Naturally, Margaret and George objected immediately. They exploded, hurling curses at me and accusing me of stirring up drama and turning Jack against his own family. They painted me as the villain who slandered Zoe and sowed discord. Jack, meanwhile, had calmed down completely. He stood silently in the hospital room, brows furrowed. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with him. His parents claimed I was lazy and didn't pull my weight, but when I came home earlier, I hadn't looked idle at all. My clothes were filthy and sun-bleached. My hands were rough and calloused, clear signs that I'd been doing hard labor. Then there was Zoe, lying on the hospital bed. Her skin was soft and pale. She was clean, neat, and looked nothing like someone who did any manual work. And then there was what I said, that I had no idea he'd been sending money back. Jack's doubts deepened. He suddenly cut off Margaret mid-rant. I want to know, who's been collecting the money I sent home? Faced with Jack's serious expression, Margaret hesitated before finally muttering, Your father and I collected it. Why didn't you tell Michelle? Why didn't you give the money to her? Jack asked. That's not it, Margaret stammered. It's not like we didn't want to give her the money. You know how Michelle is, stubborn. All she cares about is Tina. I was afraid she'd waste the money or spend it all at once, so we kept it behind her back. Jack's temple visibly twitched. So she really hasn't used a single cent of the money I sent over the past few years? Margaret quickly backtracked. No, of course she used it. The oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, everything in the kitchen was bought with the money you sent. She definitely benefited from it. But that truth was hard to swallow. Jack's face darkened. He suddenly stood up and walked straight out of the hospital room. Margaret and George exchanged a glance, then hurried after him. Son, where are you going? Listen to your mom. Michelle's got a rotten temper. You saw it yourself. She dares to talk back and mock us right to our faces. Just imagine how she treats us when you're not around. Jack looked coldly at Margaret. She bullies you? Son, there's no need to confront her like that, Margaret said nervously. She didn't dare face me head on. She's mad at us because of the money. That's all. Your father and I weren't trying to keep it from her out of spite. We were just afraid she'd waste it, and we were worried she'd start thinking about other men if she had money. She's not like your sister-in-law. Zoe stayed willingly. She never asked for anything. And what if one day she just leaves Tina behind and walks away? Margaret said. Then what are we supposed to do? Jack's face remained cold, and he said nothing. Just then, a familiar villager walked down the hallway. Seeing Jack and Margaret, he smiled and greeted them. Someone sick at your place? It's Zoe, Margaret answered quickly. That daughter-in-law of ours is so delicate. Always sick every other day, can't help with a single thing, just like some pampered city princess. If it weren't for Michelle holding everything together, I don't know how we'd survive." Jack heard every word clearly. He suddenly turned and stared at Margaret. "Didn't you say Michelle was lazy and did nothing?" Margaret hadn't expected someone else to blow her cover. Her face flushed red. "Son, we didn't mean to lie to you. Michelle, she's not actually that lazy. She's helped your father and me a lot. It's just, she's got a terrible temper. Always complaining about us. She and Zoe don't get along. I just figured if Zoe went with you to the base, they'd stop clashing." Jack was furious. But that's no excuse to twist the truth and turn things upside down. Margaret waved her hands. "We were just out of options. You promised your brother you'd take care of Zoe and the child, but Michelle wouldn't agree. She fights with us constantly. She wants to live separately from Zoe. But how could that work? Zoe's in no shape to be on her own, and she can't raise the child by herself either." "That's still no reason to lie," Jack snapped. "Looks like I'll have to reconsider who I'm bringing with me." This is our fault," Margaret stammered. "But whatever you do, don't take Michelle. If you take her, what will your father and I do at home? All the fieldwork depends on her. And besides, you promised your brother you'd look after Zoe and the baby. If you leave them here, what kind of man does that make you?" As Margaret ranted on, Jack felt like a complete fool. He wasn't stupid. He could see now that he'd been played by his own parents and falsely accused Michelle. Thinking back to how harshly he'd treated her, not even sparing her any dignity, he felt a deep pang of guilt. Without another word, Jack left them behind and strode home quickly. As soon as Jack was gone, Zoe, who had been faking illness, immediately got up, completely fine. She and Margaret and George were discharged from the hospital and rushed back home, discussing what to do next along the way. Jack was tall and walked fast, and he was deeply upset. Now that he realized he had wronged Michelle, he was determined to go home and apologize to her to clear things up. But as he reached the doorstep, he heard a child crying inside, followed by Michelle's voice shouting, "Why are you crying? All you ever do is eat. You're hungry. I'm hungry too. All you do is open your mouth and expect good food. What, you think I don't have a mouth?" Jack pushed the door open in 3 quick strides. He saw Tina sitting on the floor, covered in dirt, holding a bowl with nothing but a few wilted vegetable leaves. Zoe's son, Leo, also held a bowl with the same pathetic leaves inside. Both children looked up at Michelle with tearful eyes. Michelle was sitting boldly at the table with a massive bowl of chicken in front of her. She held a chicken drumstick in her hand and was eating with abandon, her lips shiny with grease. Jack froze. You started eating by yourself?" Michelle didn't even look at him. She kept eating, chewing through the drumstick greedily. In a matter of seconds, she devoured the drumstick, the chicken breast, and the wings. Then she shoved the empty bowl aside and walked off without saying a word. Jack's forehead pulsed with veins, but he held back his anger. He calmed the crying children and added more pieces of chicken to their bowls. At that moment, Margaret, George, and Zoe arrived back. The children, still sobbing, recounted everything that had happened, how Michelle had killed the chicken, eaten the good parts herself, and left them with scraps. Margaret and George had no idea why Michelle was acting like this all of a sudden, but they recognized a golden opportunity when they saw one. Immediately, the two of them launched into a scolding frenzy, loudly criticizing Michelle for being selfish and heartless. But for once, Jack didn't say a word. He just stood there silently and didn't join in. By the time Jack pushed the door open and entered the house, I had already cleaned up and was getting ready to rest, slipping off my shoes by the bed. When Jack walked in, I didn't even lift my eyes. Every time he came back home, I would always fuss over him, asking if he was warm enough, if he needed anything, rushing around like some unpaid servant, catering to his every need. But not this time. This time, I didn't ask, didn't move. My face stayed cold the entire time. I could only imagine how that made Jack feel. I expected him to explode, to come at me, demanding an explanation, but to my surprise, he held it in. Jack was the one to break the silence. "Michelle, let's talk." "Sure," I nodded, my eyes still indifferent as I looked at him. "Go ahead. You start." When he saw me staring at him like that, quiet and detached, Jack turned his head away. He didn't dare meet my eyes. I just asked my parents. It was them who picked up the money I sent back. They spent it all. So? I said, my voice thick with sarcasm. Does that mean I owe you something? That I've wronged you these past years? Thank you so much for your hard work. What does one sentence, "You've worked hard," wipe away all my suffering? Is it that easy? I stared at Jack, cold and unyielding. He must have thought I would forgive him, say it was okay, that I didn't blame him. But how could I not? I remembered what I learned before I died, that gut-wrenching truth. And all I wanted in that moment was to tear this heartless bastard apart. Jack stood there, awkward, seeing that I still said nothing, just continued to stare at him with dead eyes. His expression turned stiff. I know what my parents did wasn't right, he said. But you weren't entirely right either. How could you eat like that in front of the kids, not give them anything? That really disappointed me. So what are you going to do about it? I asked. Jack was stunned. He had expected me to apologize, admit I was wrong, promise to change. He didn't expect me to throw the question right back at him like that. I wasn't playing by the old rules anymore, and it left him completely off balance. He stiffened his neck. Don't you want to know why I came back this time? I gave a dry laugh. The sound of it clearly irritated him even more. I got promoted. I'm allowed to bring family with me to live on base. My parents want me to take Zoe and her son. Well then, I said, without even blinking, go ahead and take them. You don't need to tell me anything. I don't care. Jack stared at me as I casually climbed into bed, showing zero reaction. He hadn't even finished speaking. He had deliberately left that first part dangling, waiting for me to object, to protest, to beg him to take me. If I did, he would have used it as a reason to lecture me, assert control, and give himself an excuse to backtrack gracefully. But I didn't say a word. I just lay down and turned my back on him, ready to sleep. Jack stood frozen in place. He stared at my back, unsure of what to do. For some reason, this time, unlike all the times before, he couldn't feel a single ounce of warmth or tenderness from me. In the past, every time he returned from leave, I'd be full of affection. But not this time. It felt like there was now an impossible chasm between us, as wide as mountains and rivers. Something had broken beyond repair. That suffocating feeling twisted in his chest, and Jack suddenly felt a strange growing fear that he might truly lose me forever. He mustered the courage to approach the bed and reached out to touch me. But just as his hand stretched forward, there was a knock at the door. Margaret's voice came through from outside. Jack, Leo's throwing up and has diarrhea. He's really sick. Jack didn't dare delay. He rushed out the door to take Leo to the hospital. Leo ended up being sick for a full week. His condition kept going up and down, better one day, worse the next. Margaret, George, Zoe, and Jack all stayed at the hospital every day, taking turns watching over him. Only I didn't show up, not even once. But that didn't mean I was idle. According to Margaret, I was causing trouble left and right. She said I'd slaughtered all the chickens we raised at home and ate every last bite by myself, not even leaving them the tails. Said I was stuffing my face while refusing to do any farm work. That I didn't feed the pigs, didn't gather pigweed, didn't tend the cattle. That the house was a total mess and I didn't bother cleaning it. That I spent all day loafing around the village, gossiping with other housewives. Jack started to think maybe his mother was being too harsh on me. What Jack said wasn't entirely without exaggeration. He'd purposely gone back to check on things himself, and sure enough, the house looked exactly like what his mother Margaret had described. A pigsty, a doghouse. Dirty clothes were thrown everywhere. The floor was covered in dust. Everything was filthy and chaotic. Tina was crawling around outside with lice all over her body and matted hair tangled into knots. No one was looking after her. Seeing this, Jack was furious. He went to look for me in secret and ended up finding me in Lisa's field. In my past life, I remembered this day vividly. Lisa had been working in the fields when falling rocks from the mountain hit her and left her disabled for life. I'd been keeping a close watch on her for days, waiting to stop it from happening. Thankfully, heaven was watching. When it finally happened, I was right there and managed to save her. She was injured, but compared to losing both her legs like last time, this time she only suffered minor injuries. I carried Lisa on my back and rushed her to the hospital, only to bump into Jack hurrying over. He helped me get Lisa to the hospital for treatment. Lisa, like me, was a woman with a hard life. Her husband was away for years and never came home, and she had a bunch of kids to raise alone. So I volunteered to take care of her while she was recovering. Lisa stayed in the hospital for a week. During that week, I didn't go home once. I didn't pay attention to what the Carter family was doing. But they kept bouncing around in front of me, especially Margaret and Zoe, both louder and more persistent than ever. Margaret narrowed her eyes at me and sneered. "You must have heard about the army transfer situation by now. Let me tell you, we've already decided Zoe is going. Don't even think about pulling anything funny." Zoe, of course, took the soft approach, tears in her eyes as she came to me looking pitiful. "Michelle, I never wanted to steal your spot, but Leo needs to go to school, and I want to give him a better chance. Please, I beg you. I lost my husband. I've suffered so much. Can't you give me this opportunity?" I gave her a gentle smile. "Sure, since you're begging, show me you really mean it." "What do you want?" she asked. "Money, of course," I said. "However much you've taken from Jack over the years, hand it all over, every last cent. If you do that, maybe I'll let you have the spot. If not, why should I let you go?" Meat that's already in her mouth, there's no way she'd spit it out. Zoe glared at me viciously. "I don't have any money to give you. I'm going. I'm already set to go. You know Jack's parents have agreed I'll go with him. You can't change their decision." "In that case," I said with a smirk, "why are you talking to me at all? Just follow Jack and leave." I watched the expression on Zoe's face twist and tighten. "Are you sure you're legally Jack's dependent?" I asked. "What do you think the military would say if they found out Jack was abandoning his wife and bringing his sister-in-law along instead? What would they do?" Her face turned pale. "I'll give you money. Okay?" "Well, now I've changed my mind," I said calmly. "Besides money, I want you to kneel and beg. I want to see that you actually mean it." Zoe's face went completely sour. "You can say no, of course," I said with a shrug. "I don't care. Someone like me has nothing to lose. But if you refuse, no matter how you get that spot, I'll go straight to the army and report everything." In the end, Zoe knelt in humiliation and banged her head against the floor. I watched her contorted, angry face and laughed to myself in silence. 3 days later, Zoe showed up with a thick wad of cash, over 2,000 yuan. I had never seen that much money in my entire past life. Money really does open doors. Now I just had to wait for Jack to take Zoe with him to the base. I'd let them build their affair, have their little love child, and then I'd strike. Over the next few days, Jack was caught in deep turmoil. To be honest, he did want to bring me with him. But the moment he told his parents about that decision, they flipped out. His mother, Margaret in particular, went completely unhinged, screaming, crying, threatening to kill herself. Jack had no idea how to handle the mess. He knew he needed to talk to me about it, but I wasn't home. I was still staying at Lisa's place, helping her recover. Whenever Jack came looking for me, I always had an excuse ready, one reason or another not to see him. Jack couldn't bring himself to swallow his pride, and so he kept dragging things out until the very last day of his leave. That day, he finally forced me to come back home with him. He thought he'd have a proper conversation with me about the transfer, about who would go with him. But just as he started to bring it up, I cut him off with a flat tone. "You made a promise to your brother to take care of his wife. Then go ahead and take her. I have no objections." Everything Jack had prepared to say was rendered completely useless. The fact that I agreed so easily didn't make him feel any better. On the contrary, it left him unsettled. He didn't want this kind of distant, overly reasonable version of me. He had expected tears, resistance, a fight that would have been more like the Michelle he knew. He couldn't say for sure that my crying and begging would have changed his decision or made him take me along instead. After all, his parents were still hovering like vultures, watching his every move. But at the very least, it would have proved to him that I still cared. That I still needed him. Then he would have had something to fight for. But I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I just calmly agreed to let Zoe go with him. Jack found himself at a complete loss for words. Looking at my indifferent face, he could only mutter dryly, "Michelle, I'll work hard. Just wait for me a little while. I'll come back for you and the kids." I gave him a faint smile. Didn't say yes, didn't say no. With the issue settled, his parents were thrilled. Zoe and Leo were happy too, and I didn't show a single sign of dissatisfaction. Only Jack felt heavy inside, burdened and bitter. The next day he was leaving. He had so many things he wanted to say to me, but I had no interest in listening. That night he tried to be intimate, thinking maybe we could reconcile physically. People always say married couples argue at the head of the bed and make up at the foot. But the moment he hinted at it, I shut him down by claiming I had my period. Jack clearly remembered. It wasn't my time of the month, so I was lying. I just didn't want to be touched by him. That fact made him furious. It wasn't like he had to sleep with me. It was just that his parents had been nagging him to have another healthy child with me. He thought maybe it wouldn't hurt to try, but I clearly didn't appreciate the gesture. He turned over and sulked. That night he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. A few times he reached out, wanting to pull me into his arms. But when he finally got the courage to touch me, I suddenly sat up and said, "I need to check on Tina." I got dressed and walked out of the room and didn't return. Jack went to Tina's room but didn't find me there. Uneasy, he searched the front and back of the house but still couldn't find me. Eventually, he had no choice but to go back to bed and wait. He sat on the bed all night, waiting for morning. When I finally came home, Jack stared at me and asked with a straight face, "Where did you go?" I was already pulling off my shoes. "Lisa needed help," I said casually. "I went to take care of her." Then he remembered. Today was the day he was leaving. And at the mention of it, I finally smiled. It was the first time I had smiled like that since he came home, and it lit up my whole face. Like his departure was the best news I'd ever heard. I happily helped him and Zoe carry their luggage, even walked with them all the way to the station. Along the way, Jack kept trying to find moments to talk to me in private. A lot, but I always managed to sidestep him perfectly. In the end, he boarded the train without exchanging a single real conversation with me. As he carried the bags and led Zoe and Leo into the station, he turned around instinctively, just once, and saw me standing outside the gate. I was smiling, but he couldn't read that smile. My lips were moving, mouthing something he couldn't make out. He didn't know how to read lips. But seeing me so cheerful, he figured I must have been wishing him well. Finally, I'd sent off Jack and Zoe, those two shameless traitors. The joy in my heart was overwhelming. "Jack, enjoy your sweet new life with Zoe. I'm counting on you two to be the perfect little happy couple. Have kids, a full house, don't disappoint me." The moment Jack and Zoe left, I kicked off my new life. One of total indulgence. I stopped supervising Tina's rehab exercises for her polio. I didn't care whether the pigs or cows had been fed or if there was food in their troughs. I didn't bother with the fields, who was planting what, or whether anything was growing. As long as I was fed, nothing else mattered. I slept in till the sun was high in the sky. After breakfast, I'd toss on my shoes and disappear for the day. In my past life, Lisa had been the kindest person to me in the whole village. During the busy season, I helped her with farm work, gathered pigweed, tended the cattle, and took care of her house, since her legs didn't work well. Sometimes I even stayed over for meals and didn't come home all day. Didn't Margaret and George always say I was lazy and useless? Well, I was finally living up to their accusations, fully and unapologetically. Without me playing the part of their live-in servant, Margaret and George had no choice but to do the field work themselves. They were exhausted, running themselves ragged, and of course, they weren't happy about it. Margaret came storming over, cursing me out. She thought she could use public pressure to force me into being their beast of burden again. In front of everyone, I calmly replied, "Didn't you tell your son I was lazy, cunning, and good for nothing? I'm just doing what you said I do. If you're not happy about it, I can leave. I'll go to the base and join Jack as his dependent. That way you won't have to see me or be annoyed anymore." The moment I mentioned going to the base to find Jack, Margaret fell silent. She didn't dare argue anymore. After all, she and Zoe had already schemed everything out. They were waiting for Zoe to cozy up to Jack, get pregnant, and give her a grandchild. If I actually went to the base and disrupted their little plan, it'd ruin everything. Margaret didn't dare make me work, so she came up with a new trick. She sent Tina over, hoping I'd soften up. But she had seriously miscalculated. Everyone in that house had betrayed and hurt me, but none of them had wounded me as deeply as Tina had. Of all of them, I now hated her the most. She was the last person I wanted to see doing well. There was no way I was going to take care of her. I looked Margaret straight in the eye and said, "She's Jack's kid. What does that have to do with me? If your son doesn't care about her, why should I? I'll be honest with you, even if she dropped dead right now, I wouldn't shed a single tear." Margaret dumped Tina next to me and walked off, thinking I'd have a change of heart. But when Tina sat there under the blazing sun all day and I didn't lift a finger, Margaret had no choice but to take her back. She knew perfectly well. Tina wasn't my child. I had every right not to care whether she lived or died. At this point, I had changed so much that Margaret and George no longer knew what to do with me. Time flew by. Without me as their free labor, Margaret and George had to work from dawn to dusk, and I never gave them a penny of the money Jack sent home. Life became unbearably hard for them, but they didn't dare complain. They thought about writing letters or calling Jack to report me, to get him to come home and discipline me. But their hearts weren't clean. They were terrified of disrupting Zoe's cozy life with Jack, especially now that they were hoping for a new baby. They didn't want to ruin that for anything. Just like that, 6 months passed quickly. When I figured the time was about right, I called Sister Grace, the woman who had told me the truth in my previous life. Over the phone, Grace said, "Michelle, you won't believe this. I saw your man at the hospital yesterday. He was with Zoe in the OBGYN department. Zoe's pregnant, big belly and all. No idea whose baby it is." Jack had only just found out about the pregnancy himself. He'd been busy with missions and hadn't noticed anything. Lately, Jack had been thinking about trying to get promoted. He wanted to bring me and the kids to live with him on base. But the night he and Zoe slept together, that happened the very first night he brought her to the base. That night, something had felt off. He'd been restless, uncomfortable, couldn't sleep. While he tossed and turned, Zoe suddenly appeared before him, naked and bold. At first, he stood up, thinking he'd push her away. But eventually his resistance wore thin. And just like that, they were together. When he sobered up, he slapped himself across the face. Hard. Over and over. But Zoe just cried and kept saying it wasn't his fault. She said it was on her, that she missed her dead husband so much, she'd started thinking of Jack as him. She didn't blame him at all, but how could Jack not blame himself? He knew he'd messed up, badly. It was a huge mistake, one that couldn't be forgiven. He didn't have the courage to face Zoe after that. The very next day, he moved out and went to live in the dorms. From that point on, he buried himself in work and took every mission he could get his hands on. He worked so hard his commanding officer couldn't stand it anymore and forced him to take a leave. But even during his leave, Jack didn't go see Zoe. He was too embarrassed, and instead chose to stay in the dorms. Jack wrote me a letter from his dorm room before finally lying down to rest. That night, he had a nightmare, bizarre and terrifying. He dreamed that Zoe's belly had swollen like a balloon, and she gave birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. The twins looked up at him and smiled, calling him Daddy. He panicked and tried to run. Then he dreamed of me, knife in hand, charging at Zoe. In the next moment, the military guards shot me down. I lay on the ground, covered in blood, eyes wide open in death, unwilling to close. Jack woke up in a cold sweat, his body soaked. It was just a dream. It wasn't real. But why had it scared him so much? He hadn't seen Zoe in 5 months. He had no idea what kind of condition she was in now. What if she really was as pregnant as she was in the dream? The thought alone terrified him. At dawn, Jack rushed back to the base housing unit he'd been assigned. When he pushed open the door, the first thing he saw was the one thing he most didn't want to see. Zoe standing there, smiling at him, very pregnant. Jack's worst fear had come true. He was now certain he felt nothing for Zoe. The child in her belly was nothing but the product of that one chaotic night. He had to deal with this. The baby couldn't stay. Without hesitation, Jack took Zoe to the hospital. The child had to be terminated, but the doctor told him the pregnancy was already far along, and it was twins. At this stage, termination would carry significant risks. Zoe collapsed to the floor, sobbing, begging him to let her keep the babies. She promised she wouldn't interfere in his life. After giving birth, she'd disappear and raise them on her own, as if nothing had ever happened. Jack's heart softened. He was responsible for this too. He couldn't just push all the blame onto Zoe. He had to find a solution that worked for both of them. Before he could figure one out, I showed up. The day I arrived was bright and clear. The kind of day no one would expect disaster. Jack had just been sitting down with Zoe, trying to talk through what to do about the babies. After careful thought, he'd finally made a decision. He was going to go through with terminating the pregnancy. The moment Zoe heard that, she broke down in tears again. She refused to give up the babies. She even knelt before Jack, pleading with him to let her keep them. Then Leo knelt down beside her too. Mother and son held each other, crying uncontrollably, making a heartbreaking scene. Jack was at his limit. Frustrated and overwhelmed, he stepped out onto the balcony for a cigarette. But he hadn't even finished his smoke when he heard shouting from outside the main gate. Loud, emotional, almost hysterical. A woman was screaming, a child was crying, and a crowd was murmuring in the background. He couldn't make out everything, but he heard a few words. Homewrecker, pregnant, worse than animals. Jack's chest tightened. Were they talking about him? He stubbed out his cigarette and turned back toward the door, only to freeze when he saw people approaching from the main road leading into the compound. Most of them were soldiers. But two people stood out immediately. From a distance, he could just barely make them out. One woman and one child. A soldier was carrying the child, and the woman was walking ahead, waving her arms wildly and shouting as she went. Jack stopped in his tracks, eyes locked on the scene. The closer the group got, the more anxious he felt. A strange panic welled up inside him. He didn't know why, but the more he looked, the more that woman reminded him of me, Michelle. No, that wasn't possible. I wouldn't show up at the base without notice. There's no way I'd come here without saying a word. It had to be someone else. He must have been mistaken. That's what he kept telling himself, even as he stared at the group. But they were headed directly for the small building he was staying in. Closer. And closer. At last, Jack saw the woman's face clearly. It really was me. Michelle. Panicked, he stumbled back into the living room like a man on fire. Zoe was still sitting on the floor, sobbing, but Jack had no time for that. Hide, he said, frantic. Quickly. Hide! You need to hide right now! Zoe looked at him, confused, unmoving. Jack, now in a full-blown panic, rushed over and tried to pull her to her feet. His mind was spinning. Where could he hide her? Where could he send her? She couldn't be here, not when I was right outside. He had to get her out of sight, fast, before I found out. But just as he dragged Zoe toward the door, a pair of military guards rushed over and blocked his way. One of them flashed his ID. We were sent by the base commander. Lieutenant Jack Carter, you are to remain here and prepare to cooperate with an investigation. Jack's heart sank. It was over. He stood frozen, knowing exactly what was coming. Zoe, however, didn't get it. She started screaming at the guards. Move! Get out of the way! While she argued, a commotion built outside the courtyard. The gate creaked open. Jack instinctively looked toward the sound, only to lock eyes with me. My gaze was ice-cold and sharp as steel. Just for a second our eyes met. He saw the ridicule in mine, pure, merciless contempt. Then I broke into a scream and charged at him, tears pouring down my face as I shouted, You bastard! You heartless, filthy animal! How could you do something this shameless? While I was back home taking care of your disabled daughter, serving your parents like a slave, you were here screwing your sister-in-law? I wept and cursed, and as I screamed, I slapped him, hard. I didn't hold back, not even a little. In this new life, the thing I wanted most was to do exactly this, to slap this disgusting man senseless, and I didn't stop at slapping. I clawed at him, dug my nails into his handsome face until it was streaked with blood. Jack didn't move. He stood still, letting me unleash everything I had. Zoe, stunned at first, finally snapped out of it when she saw what I was doing to him. She lunged at me, furious. Get away from him. In response, I turned and slapped her too. Loud, sharp slaps, one after another. As I hit her, I shouted, Are you even human? There are millions of men in this world. How is it that you went after mine? How could you stoop so low? Zoe's face turned swollen and red. Her lips bled. She tried to speak, but what was there to say? After that night with Jack, after confirming her pregnancy, she had considered herself his wife. She had introduced herself to everyone as Mrs. Carter. Everyone on base thought she was Jack's actual spouse. It had never even crossed her mind that I might show up like this. If she'd known I'd come, she might have tried to play it smart. But there were no what-ifs. As the soldiers stared at the scene before them, the looks on their faces turned cold with disgust. They couldn't say anything, bound by military discipline, but they didn't have to. Their expressions said it all. The other army wives weren't bound by such rules. They muttered in disbelief. How shameless can you be? No morals at all. There are no other men in the world? She's nothing but a homewrecker. Don't just blame the woman. That man's no good either. Leaving his wife and child just to run off with his sister-in-law? What a joke. Maybe he didn't want the wife and kid because the child's disabled, can't even walk. Still, it's not the kid's fault. He didn't choose to be born that way. Tina, my daughter, who had been quietly held in a soldier's arms this whole time, heard those words. Her eyes welled with tears. She struggled to get down, and the moment her feet hit the ground, she crawled her way forward and knelt in front of Zoe. Tears streaked her little face as she spoke clearly. Auntie, please give us back our dad. I'm begging you, give him back to us. Mommy and I don't need money. We can live a hard life. Just give him back. All of Dad's money went to you and your son, Tina cried. I just want one thing. Please don't take my dad away from me. Jack was taken away by military guards. The fallout from this incident was huge. He wasn't just reprimanded for inappropriate conduct and improper relationships, it was worse than that. Seeing little Tina, disabled and in tears, begging for her father, shattered everyone's composure. No one could believe Jack's shameless, two-faced behavior. In today's society, how could such outdated and disgusting customs still exist? The military leadership had already considered him dangerously old-fashioned. They believed he had ignored ethics and conscience just to try for a healthy son. Now they suspected he even intended to abandon his disabled child. A man like that had no place in the military. The verdict came quickly. Jack Carter was dishonorably discharged and forcibly returned to the countryside. As for me, I had only one request: to divorce Jack. A clean break, nothing more. The base commander personally listened to my story. After verifying everything, he was deeply sympathetic. Our divorce was swift, no delays, no resistance. The day I got the divorce certificate, I was in an unusually good mood. Jack had finally been punished, but it wasn't enough, not yet. I was still waiting to see every single person in the Carter family get what they deserved. I returned to the village shortly after Jack and Zoe came back. Jack's dismissal had made a big splash, and the entire village came out to watch the spectacle as he walked back home with his heavily pregnant mistress and their child. Disgusted shouts and curses rang out from every direction. Jack kept his head down and said nothing the whole way. And when Jack's parents, Margaret and Frank, saw their son punished and disgraced, all that warm enthusiasm they'd once shown for Zoe and her baby bump disappeared. Compared to carrying on the family line, their son's future clearly mattered more. Margaret stopped treating Zoe nicely. Zoe, now burdened with shame, knew better than to talk back. Even with that belly, she started getting up early to help around the house. No more whining about aches or fainting spells. But all her desperate efforts to win them over didn't help. Margaret snapped at her every day with that shrill, bitter voice of hers. You jinx! Didn't I tell you to stop scheming after my son? If you want a man, find another one. Why are you still clinging to mine like a leech? Look at what you've done to this family. Are you satisfied now? Zoe didn't dare answer back. She swallowed her shame and kept quiet. After a full week of enduring Margaret's vicious tongue, I returned, bringing Tina with me, the very child they'd tried so hard to erase. When Margaret heard I was back, all her old hatred surged up again. She rushed out of the house, ready to beat me in the street. She still thought I was the same Michelle she could push around before. But I wasn't. I grabbed that hag by her greasy hair and slapped her hard across the face. Again and again. Her nose and mouth gushed blood as she screamed in pain. When real strength shows up, bullies crumble. She couldn't fight back. She scrambled off the ground, dazed and defeated, ready to crawl back into her rat hole. I didn't rush. Calmly, with the whole village behind me watching, I followed her. Holding Tina by the hand, I trailed her all the way back to the house. Just as she was about to shut the door, I blocked it with one hand, then picked Tina up like a chick and shoved her inside. I looked Zoe in the eyes and said, loud and clear, "Here, I'm returning your biological daughter to you." The villagers exploded. "Michelle, what are you talking about?" "What do you mean, returning her daughter?" "Yeah, Tina's your kid, right?" I raised my voice so everyone could hear. "Since you're all curious, let me lay it out for you. Tina is not my daughter, she's Zoe Martin's daughter. My son, he died shortly after birth." Everyone was stunned. "If Tina is Zoe's child, then why was she raised by you?" "Isn't it obvious?" I said, my voice cold. Zoe and Jack were sleeping together? To keep me tied to the family, to make sure I stayed loyal, served them like a maid, they passed off Zoe's baby as mine. "Unbelievable," someone whispered. "They tricked her into raising someone else's kid? And a disabled one at that. Right?" Zoe and Jack were freeloading all day, while Michelle worked herself to death tending the fields, the house, and that sick little girl. That whole family is heartless. And don't forget, someone else added, Margaret was going around telling everyone that Michelle was cursed, that she gave birth to a disabled child and brought bad luck to the family. She's the one who spread that lie? What a witch! She even went around telling people that her eldest son died because of me. "Yeah, I remember," someone in the crowd said. "That woman went around the whole village, spewing that kind of trash." I believed it too back then. Same here. I really thought Michelle was a jinx. But looking at it now, Michelle wasn't a jinx, she was their blessing. Exactly. Ever since she divorced Jack, look what's happened to the Carter family. They got exactly what they deserved. As the villagers whispered and little Tina sobbed uncontrollably, Jack finally showed up. I hadn't seen him for a week, and he looked like hell. His eyes were sunken, his face still scratched from when I clawed him, and he stumbled to the doorway. "Michelle?" he said in a shaky voice. "What you just said, is it true? Our child, he's really gone? And Tina is my brother's daughter?" "Don't act like you didn't know," I snapped. "Wasn't Tina your little bargaining chip? You and your precious sister-in-law cooked up that whole scheme together to trap me. I swear I didn't know. I swear on everything, I never did this to you." "Save your breath. I don't believe a word of it. Doesn't matter if you knew or not. Tina's a Carter, Zoe's biological daughter. She has nothing to do with me. I'm giving her back to you, and this time, it's for good." As I turned to leave, Jack tried to stop me. I stared him down coldly. "There's nothing left for us to say. And Jack, if murder wasn't illegal, I wouldn't hesitate for a second to wipe your entire family off the face of the earth." He froze when he saw the hatred in my eyes. I sneered, "Jack Carter, your family's punishment has only just begun. I'll be watching. I'll be here to witness every bit of retribution that's coming your way." That wasn't an empty threat. I wasn't trying to scare him. I was simply stating a fact. I've never really believed in karma. I believe in taking revenge with my own two hands. That's why I made sure Jack and Zoe were sent back to the village with nothing. Completely ruined. Now that Jack had lost everything, his career, his pride, I wanted to see if Zoe would still love him like she claimed she did. If she'd still be willing to have his children. Maybe she really did like his handsome face. Maybe she'd stay just for that. But life wasn't going to be that easy. I was eager to see what she'd do, now that there were two disabled elders in the house, both unable to work. Would she still hang on? Let's wait and see. That day, I went home with Mrs. Tucker, caught up with her, and left the Carter house to stew in its own drama. But word traveled fast. The next day, neighbors who'd been eavesdropping said they heard Jack screaming at Zoe and Margaret, demanding answers about Tina. After trying to deny it, they finally broke down and confessed. Zoe and Margaret had made the switch while I was unconscious. They admitted they used me to raise their child and run their house like a slave. Jack apparently hadn't known the truth. But that didn't matter anymore. Whether he knew or not, the pain he and Zoe caused me in our past life had been very, very real. And then came even bigger news. The very next day, Margaret fell down the stairs while going up to the second floor. She broke her tailbone and had to be rushed to the hospital. In my previous life, she faked an injury to stop me from going back to the city. She kept me at her beck and call, forcing me to take care of her for 2 long years. But this time, she got what she deserved. This time, the injury was real. I wasn't waiting for karma. I was karma. That staircase had already been on the verge of collapse. All I did was make a few extra cuts in the weak spots to speed things up. Now Margaret was permanently paralyzed. She'd never walk again. And that was just the beginning. A few days later, Frank had an accident too. He was up in the hills cutting grass when he fell into a ditch and broke his leg. The village buzzed with gossip. Serves them right. It's retribution. That family did too many awful things. Even the heavens couldn't stand it anymore. But I knew better. It wasn't fate, it was me. I had known Frank would be up there cutting grass. So I'd planted a little bait, a few scattered bills, enough to tempt him. And Frank, true to form, couldn't resist the lure. Even though he knew better, Frank still took the risk for a bit of money. So when he broke his leg over a few scattered bills, it wasn't just an accident, it was inevitable. After both Margaret and Frank were left bedridden, the job of caring for them fell squarely on Zoe's shoulders. Zoe had always lived an easy life, used to being pampered and waited on. This was the first time she had to serve others. She managed to get by with feeding them and doing a bit of laundry, but when it came to changing bedpans, wiping them down, and enduring Margaret's vile, venomous mouth, even she couldn't take it. Frankly, I don't think anyone could. 2 weeks of tending to those 2 miserable wretches was all Zoe could take. She snapped and tried to quit. Of course, Jack wouldn't let her. He beat her and forced her back into servitude. Ever since Margaret became paralyzed, she'd become even more twisted than before. She was always a vindictive hag, but now she blamed everything on Zoe. In her mind, it was Zoe's fault that she and Frank were in this state. If Zoe hadn't gone after Jack, if she hadn't gotten pregnant, their family would have been fine. Jack would have kept rising through the military ranks, and they would have lived a life of comfort and prestige. None of this would have happened, but what Margaret never did was reflect on her own part in it. Sure, Zoe had her eyes on Jack, but Margaret was the one who allowed it. People are selfish like that. They never take responsibility. They twist reality until they believe their own lies. And once Margaret convinced herself Zoe had ruined everything, it didn't take much to light the fuse. One day, Zoe was a few minutes late cleaning up their waste, and Margaret lost it. She grabbed Zoe's hair and yanked with all her might. Even though her lower half was paralyzed, her arms were still strong. She slapped Zoe again and again. Zoe finally had enough and fought back. In the struggle, Margaret was yanked off the bed. Her head hit the corner of a nearby table. Blood poured out like a broken faucet. Her grip on Zoe's hair slowly loosened. Zoe froze, horrified. She screamed and bolted for the door to get help, but tripped over the threshold and hit the ground hard. Blood pooled under her too. By the time Jack got home from working in the fields, Margaret had already bled out. Zoe had lost the baby and lay unconscious on the floor. In my past life, those twins she was carrying never made it. This time, they didn't even get the chance. Zoe now faced jail time. No matter how you looked at it, she was responsible for Margaret's death. Maybe it wasn't murder, but she wasn't walking away free. A few years behind bars were guaranteed. I had finally seen with my own eyes the downfall of the Carter family. And I have to say, it felt satisfying. I didn't stick around. With the money I'd saved, I left for Shenzhen. It was the height of the reform era, and opportunity was everywhere. Relying on what I remembered from my past life, I started a small business, just a little street stall at first, but step by step, I built experience, connections, and capital. Within 10 years, my business had grown into a well-known brand. I opened several branches. I worked hard, and along the way I met a man who shared my values. We took the time to truly know and love each other. 3 years later, I got married again. This time, there were no lies, no betrayal, no manipulation, just 2 people who gave each other their whole hearts. I was deeply fulfilled. 3 years into our marriage, I had a child. He was adorable. Watching him grow day by day helped heal the wounds of my past. I finally let go of that nightmare in the countryside. That painful chapter was closed. At least until I unexpectedly ran into Mrs. Tucker during a vacation. She had changed so much since our days in the village. Her hair was done up in voluminous waves, she wore heels and flawless makeup. When she called my name, I didn't even recognize her at first. But she was an old friend, and we ended up having dinner together. Over food and drinks, she brought up the Carter family. Zoe had been released after serving 8 years in prison. With nowhere else to go, she returned to the Carter home. She planned to settle down with Jack, and Jack accepted her. After all, he was alone, struggling to care for disabled Tina and Margaret, and also looking after Frank. He needed help. But no one could have predicted what happened the night Jack Carter and Zoe Miller had their small white wine wedding ceremony. That very night, 15-year-old Tina Carter stabbed Zoe in the chest with a knife. Not once, but over and over again. As she drove the blade into her, Tina mumbled things that didn't make sense to anyone. "It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have ended up like this. I should have already been cured. I should have been normal. You ruined everything, you shameless woman." Zoe never made it to the hospital. She died on the spot. Tina was taken into custody. She screamed and laughed like someone completely out of touch with reality, saying all kinds of incoherent things. People said she had gone mad. After a psychiatric evaluation, they concluded she was mentally unstable. Eventually, she was sent to a mental institution, likely to spend the rest of her life there. I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy for what happened to the Carter family. I just sat there, smiling, listening to Mrs. Tucker recount it all. She told me Frank Carter had passed away, and Jack was working as a security guard somewhere, pulling in 3,000 or 4,000 yuan a month. I didn't care. These people no longer had anything to do with my life, and I wasn't going to waste my energy worrying about them. What I didn't expect was to see Jack again. One day, my husband and I took our son to a luxury hotel. As we arrived, I spotted Jack standing guard outside, stationed there like some forgotten relic. He looked much older, tired, worn, like life had ground him down. When he saw me, walking hand in hand with my son and arm in arm with my husband, his expression twisted with emotion. His lips moved like he was trying to call my name. I didn't even glance his way. The next morning, as I was heading out, Jack was waiting for me. He stepped in front of me. "I want to talk," he said. "I have nothing to say to you," I answered coldly. Still, he blurted out a few hurried words before I could walk away. "Michelle, you came back too, didn't you? I came back after you left. I'm sorry for what happened in our past life. I never meant to be involved with Zoe. She tricked me." By the time I realized what was happening, she was already 6 months pregnant. The doctor said terminating the pregnancy would harm her health. I didn't know what to do, so I let her keep the baby. I never knew how to explain it to you. I didn't know you would come looking for me. I had no idea Zoe would be so vicious and shameless to frame you like that. When I found out you were dead, I was devastated. Michelle, after that, the military began investigating. I was discharged. Zoe was arrested. None of us got a happy ending in the last life. I swear I didn't know anything about the baby swap. That was my mother and Zoe's doing. I rolled my eyes. "And what exactly are you hoping to accomplish by telling me all this now? That I'll forgive you?" He fell silent. "Sorry," I said slowly, enunciating every word. "If sorry was enough, we wouldn't need laws or police. I will never forgive you."